Hey, it's Jess, and welcome to The Heart Strong, a podcast where we explore navigating the challenges in our lives. It's my personal mission to guide you towards your greatest potential. So come along with me as we explore living with courage, or as I put it, living heart strong. On today's podcast, I'm sitting down with Dr. Emani. Dr. Emani is a pediatric cardiac surgeon at Boston Children's Hospital. That means he operates on hearts of babies, children, and young people born with congenital heart disease. Dr. Emani is a favorite amongst his patients, and while technically an exceptional surgeon, he's also an exceptional human. And that's why I wanted to talk to him today. I've worked with many doctors, surgeons, and specialists with my kids. And one thing I've learned after all these years is that they are people too. They have hopes and joys and pains and families and bills and wonders. Dr. Emani has focused his career on helping to improve life for children with single ventricle heart disease, which means that half of their heart didn't form properly. He's also worked on valve technologies for children, and he's been a board member of the Ethan Lindberg Foundation for many years. I've witnessed his incredible dedication to his patients and their families, and so it is my honor to talk with him today. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Ram. I'm so thankful that you're here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I thought before we dove in today, maybe you could just tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself so they could get to know you before we jump into our conversation.
Yeah, so my name is Emani. I am a cardiac surgeon at Boston Children's Hospital, and I grew up in Atlanta and spent some time in Chicago, where I did my engineering studies, and then ultimately came out to Boston to do medical school. And in addition to doing clinical work, I like doing research and trying to advance the field of pediatric cardiac surgery. But I also enjoy hiking, running, and sports of all kinds. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. I always think it's so good I love that you said that about the running and the biking because I feel like, people think of doctors, they see you in that one setting, but it's good to know that you have other things that you like to do. So I'm glad you said that. So today I want to focus our conversation on how curiosity shapes our lives. And I think curiosity is such an important tool that we can use to sort of become the people that we are sort of created to be in some ways. And you're just a tremendously curious person. And so I just would love to dive into the ways that it shaped you. And so I want to start the conversation here. And if you could just tell us a little bit about how curiosity has shaped your life and how it continues to shape your life and your work.
Thank you, Jessica. That's a great question. I remember when I was a little kid, really loving to understand how things work, and when my parents were gonna throw out this old radio or that old microwave, I'd be like, no, 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 don't throw it away. I want to look at it, and I would take it apart and look inside. And I remember being really fascinated by all of these transistors and resistors and electronic components, and always imagine putting together the CRT tube from a television set with a transistor and a resistor from a radio, and trying to create some futuristic machine that could help you with time travel. And I think that sort of carried on later in life when when I was allowed to work. The first thing I did was start working on cars. I loved cars. I loved understanding how cars worked, and so that really sparked my interest in engineering studies when I was younger. Fast forward now to current era, and I still love sort of thinking about ways to redefine how we see science, medicine, and the intersection with humanity, and really just understanding that there's never one right way of doing things, and it's a constant dynamic process. And trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing always means re-envisioning ourselves, and how we treat each other, how we interact with each other. So
Mhm.
that's there's a lot there, and
Yeah.
I'd love to dive more into that in a little bit.
Yeah. So you started out with engineering, and I'm just wondering how you like segued into cardiology and pediatrics. Can you share with us a little bit how you got there?
Yeah, so I was dead set on being in the automotive industry when I was young, and I wanted to do engineering, specifically mechanical engineering, because I wanted to uh, really, design the next futuristic car.
Mm.
And I was kind of lined up to go to either GM or Ford for an internship. But I happened to take a course when I was in college on cardiovascular physiology, and this was a engineering core requirement, and it just totally shifted my perspective to think about how the human body functions, and to understand how the various components work together was fascinating to me, and that really was a turning point. And then after that, I started to pursue medicine, and I've really felt that initial perspective as an engineer has really shaped who I am now
Mhm.
as a surgeon.
So something that you said in there was really interesting to me. It's like you had this path in mind and you were going down the path, and then you took this class and you were like, "Ooh, I'm curious about this." And you followed that. And I think that's really interesting because a lot of times in our lives, like we something sparks an interest, but we don't pursue it because we think we need to stay on said path, right? That we had been on or that we had planned to be on. Like what kind of gave you, I guess, the courage maybe at that time? Because especially when we're young and we feel maybe obligated to be doing something that we had planned to do, like what gave you the courage or the impetus? Did you have somebody in your life that was like, hey, yeah, go give that go give it a shot, see what you think?
Well, it's really interesting because as a part of this class, we had to do a project, and the project that I had designed was a vest for patients with cystic fibrosis to help clear
Mhm.
secretions. And as a part of the project, we wanted to go see, how it might work,
Mhm.
and so we actually visited a hospital, and we had the privilege to interact with patients, and they were so generous in their time, and sort of telling us what they felt and how something like this might help them. And that interaction was really the most powerful thing for me. That's what really turned in my mind. That is, that you can have this meaningful interaction with somebody, and you're learning from each other.
Mhm.
I'm trying to design something, but I'm also learning about their experience with cystic fibrosis. And that interaction and that set of interactions, we had multiple interactions, and trying to talk about how to make things better. That's what really turned it for me, because I loved that that you can actually you have that connection with somebody, and that
Yeah.
connection goes so deep. So it was it was that aspect that really gave me the charge, because I didn't need any more motivation than that.
That was enough. And I think in knowing you the way that I do and knowing, so many of the families that you treat, like that's the core of, I think, what makes you such a great surgeon and physician is that you have that. You've kept that with you. And I think that that's really powerful. And I think it makes, you know, like I want to talk about the intersection of medicine and engineering because I think it's very interesting. I think it's very unique. It's something that you have. But, you take my mom was a director of a co-op program for School of Engineering for like most of her career. So I know all about the different, she talk about her students and sometimes it's very linear, right? It's very kind of an that's just kind of how I've seen it. But I think that you brought in this medical component, which is this human component, and so could you talk a little bit about that intersection and how you think that's so powerfully shifted and enabled you really to do the really amazing work that you have done. Because I think there might even be some young people that eventually listen to this and they might be curious about that same idea. So, talk about that intersection of medicine and engineering a little bit.
Yeah, I think when we're going through our training, we're sort of prescribed a pathway, if you will, and uh, to me, that's really important to sort of make sure you're getting a structured education. But what was really impactful for me was the fact that I did not come from a family of physicians. Nobody
Mhm.
in my immediate family had practiced medicine, but many of them were on the other side. They were on the receiving side,
Mm.
and I really saw a lot of the great things that can be done with medicine, and the interactions when they worked well with that person who you just who you trust, and
Mhm.
the how that trust could move mountains. And I also saw how things sometimes weren't optimal, and how that could really be really a distractor in someone's life. And so to me, that always became very important, that I do something, and I be able to have interactions that are going to be meaningful, that are going to be impactful, and that will constantly evolve. And so when I went to engineering school, I was also introduced to mentors who felt that, you know, these are tools, and these tools are meant to do something very important, and that something that's very important has to be at the center.
Mm.
And that really shaped my
Mhm.
perspective, rather than thinking about you know engineering as being a way to get more publications or get more patents and pad your
Mhm.
CV. That's kind of traditionally what people think that they have to do. But what really brings meaning to what you do, and what brings long term fulfillment, is when you have a central purpose.
Mhm. And that was people, it sounds like, shifting things for people.
Absolutely, and that was being able to, at the end of the day, alleviate suffering, bring a smile to someone's face, make the quality of life
Mhm.
more meaningful
Mhm.
for even one patient.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be widespread impact. It can even be impact for one individual. That's
Mhm.
enough for me.
Yeah, and that makes a difference. So, like, there's a huge creative component to what you do, and I actually started reading a book by Rick Rubin, and it's about creativity, and I think it's really interesting because we're all creative people in some ways, and you might not think of, you think of art, I guess, when you think of creativity, but we all are creative, and you're creative. And so there's a huge component. And creativity isn't always linear, right? It takes kind of a path of its own, and so, there's great imaging available pre-op. You can do a cardiac MRI, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. I know you use 3D printing sometimes. You can model a heart and you're like, okay, this is important. I just want to say, because you are dealing with kids who are pretty sick or who have really complex congenital heart disease, something that maybe other people have seen and haven't been able to help them with, or something that isn't something traditionally seen. And so you're really facing these creative questions, really, when it comes to the heart. And so, I'm wondering, so you do all these pre-op things and you try to get the best plan that you can, but I would imagine that you get in there sometimes and it's different, or you're seeing something that you didn't see before. Like, how do you creatively problem solve in those situations? And just take us behind the scenes a little bit with you about how you approach a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, this is totally different than I thought it was going to be.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a very important process. I want to say, initially, I actually was a musician at one point, so
Mm.
I do feel that as as a surgeon, it's important to have really um, um, that aspect that pulls you away from the cut and dry. And so,
Mhm.
there's sort of the engineering side of me that's very equations oriented, but then there's a part of me that just craves and loves to think about breaking rules,
Mhm.
and that's where music is my outlet for that and
Mhm.
my ability to do this. So that really shaped, I think that side of me, and whereas I couldn't actually ultimately build that time machine that I dreamed of when I was a kid, that kind of idea of saying, let's take all of the parts that we have and really understand how do we bring everything to bear to create something new.
Mhm.
And that part of engineering I really love. When it comes to taking care of patients, it becomes for me like an entire experience. So when I meet with my patients and families for the first time, I'm really trying to connect at a deeper level to understand sort of what are we trying to accomplish, what are the goals, and to make sure that is center
Mhm.
to whatever it is that I end up doing in the operating room. And then I like my quiet time. I feel like the times when I'm really thinking about it the most are when I'm sitting in my office after a busy day in the operating room. I'm thinking about a particular patient, whether it be next day's surgery for next day's surgery, or whether it be a patient that I just met, and I'll just roll through all of the imaging and I'll imagine what the heart looks like in my
Mhm.
mind. The 3D imaging and the 3D software kind of allow me to also do that in a different way. And I'll roll through the imaging several times and just really imagine what I'll see when I'm in the operating room. And then I'll try to start to imagine all of the possibilities. What all can I do to help, make this work better? And that may be redirecting blood flow in some way. That may be shifting, things around, and it may be something that I do in several steps or a single step. And I'm trying to think about what is going in that direction. What's there that I might get into trouble with, and how do I avoid that? And so sometimes I'll spend hours just mulling on it and thinking about it and imagining what something might look like. Um, uh, Back in the days when we were doing a lot of 3D printing, I might actually simulate it on a physical heart. But now we can do a lot of that on the computer. So I may try to say, okay, let me draw this way and see what happens. And then that's kind of where it will all happen, and then oftentimes I'll find myself literally sleeping on it,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
I'm just sort of thinking about it, and often that settling of the plan will just kind of solidify, so that the next morning I feel like I know what the different options are. I never go into an operation with a single plan. I
Mhm.
always go in with the what ifs and thinking about the what ifs and how we might have different options, so that if something changes based upon what I see, I have an alternative.
Mhm. So then when you get in there and you have these multiple plans and then you kind of see what you have to work with essentially, like, what does it feel like when you get something that you really didn't expect or that, one of those plans kinda works for, but you're like, "Ooh, I'm not." I mean, do you give yourself time? Like, how do you kind of, I guess I'm more almost thinking it more emotionally than because I mean, this is just like a human reaction. You're like, "Oh crap." What do like we
Yeah,
do that, when we have these we kind of map things out and then something goes awry and we're a little bit jarred, which
yeah,
which takes us off center, I guess, off
yeah,
point, but you probably need to be in that situation. So, what is
yeah.
that kind of how do you, I guess, more like uh, emotionally or mentally sort of bring yourself back to center when you're sort of facing that?
Yeah, this is where it becomes really important to have to rely on each other and on teams.
Mhm.
And I really make sure that we establish a culture in the operating
Mhm.
room of, the patient first, so that um, I immediately will stabilize the situation and then turn to my friends and colleagues. I'll
Mhm.
call people and I'll make sure that we have everybody sort of, helping think about it to make sure
Mhm.
that, um, I've thought of everything, that I'm really being comprehensive, so that the next step is appropriate, is calculated, and I think that is such an important concept, that you're not alone, and
Right.
you never want to be alone. I mean, this is something that we learned from the airline industry a long time ago, that
Yeah.
there's never one pilot. There's always multiple people there to kind of help think about it, and that's one of the things that I love about working in Boston, is that we have so many talented surgeons,
Mhm.
all of whom have really dedicated their lives to thinking about creative solutions. So that part becomes more of a more manageable, and it really takes away some of the butterflies from the stomach, which I definitely feel when something is changing. But that support really helps us really take it to that next step.
Yeah. I know you guys do a really good job of even preoperatively talking about cases and going back and forth with each other. And I think that's such an important idea in problem solving in general, right? To be able to have people in your circle that you can call and that you can ask. And I love that you said that, because it's never one person that's getting somewhere, right? It's like you have to have a team. So I think
Absolutely.
that's really important. You talk about like prepping for the surgery, and there's a question that I kind of just that came to me was like, you've met with this family, you've prepped for the surgery, and you talked earlier in the conversation just about the human component. And I think I always think about, I mean, I'm not a surgeon. I've had children that have had many surgeries, but I always kind of think about that challenge. And my husband and I talk about it like being caring about the patient and having a relationship with them, which you're very good at. And but then having to also sort of make that separation and saying, now I have to go over here and I have to do this. Like and that's got to be hard. Like I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that feels like and how you make that separation. And I know there's lots of conversations about, how close physicians and families should be. And I think some physicians are more comfortable with it than others. I mean, I've definitely had people where it's like they want to cut you off. They don't really want to. And I sometimes the mother part of me is like about that, but I understand that. I kind of respect it, because now you've got to go in and operate on my kid. So how do you kind of do that? Because I mean, you're such a good person to ask, because you're so kind and loving to your patients. You give them so much of yourself. I think that's a very different thing about you than, frankly, than a lot of surgeons that I've experienced. And so you're really good at it, but like, how do you kind of cut that off and then say, okay, now I've got to actually do this?
That's a great question, Jessica. I was told that initially, that you have to really find ways to create that separation, and that meant, saying that you set boundaries between your
Mhm.
families, and I started off in my early career with that, and honestly, it didn't feel right,
Hmm.
and I remember a turning point when I said to myself, I don't agree with that. And I started to actually say, I'm going to go the other direction, and I'm going to use a deeper connection to help drive me and motivate me. So what I have now gone to do, and it works for me much better, is I like to, you know, I like to play with my patients, when
Mhm.
they're,
Yeah.
especially if they're kids,
Yeah.
or I want to get to know what a patient does if they're older, and they
Mhm.
can, they can talk to me about what they love, and I want to establish that connection, and then when I'm in the operating room, I'm actually imagining that child doing that, and I'm imagining
Wow.
that patient actually, going out and riding a bike or doing, one of my patients does, dances ballet, and I'll imagine, okay, that this person's got to go and dance again, and I want them to dance the greatest, and that deeper connection actually makes me feel more connected and able to do a much better job than, sort of the artificial connection component, element. I'm not saying that every that works for every surgeon, but for
Sure.
me, that actually was a big turning point in the way that I, um, in the way that my psyche worked, and the way that I interacted in the operating room, the way that I felt. It just didn't feel right to me that all of a sudden I would be compassionate on one side, but then I'd have to turn that off, or change
Mm,
that in some way, shape, or form. But to then really intensify that connection, uh, it just, that really felt right to me. And so that's what I do when I go into the
mm,
operating. I tell everybody in the operating, oh, Johnny here he wants to play baseball, and his last season he hit a couple of home runs, and
mm.
we'll just talk. I'll just talk. I'll just
Yeah.
remember know what this child is about, or know what this patient's about. If I'm operating on an adult, I have three kids, names are this,
Yeah.
and then it just like, I feel like that, actually motivates the whole
Mm.
team to
Yeah.
think about, this not as a task, but
Mhm.
as but we're really doing something bigger here.
Mhm.
So that that's
That's so
that's
cool. That's really beautiful. I wonder too if sort of in the linear way of thinking, if that connection that you have with your patients, sort of that human sort of connection that's kind of beyond just the task that you're doing, also maybe helps you make decisions. Like it's just an
yeah.
idea. Like maybe because you are connected and there is something there, maybe you sort of get these little nudges like, okay, now I know this about this person, and this is how. I don't know, I just wonder if there's something like beyond sort of the physical that happens in that
Well, it's
really.
interesting. It's very interesting you say that, Jessica, because I think, one of the things that, when we talk about the butterflies, or we talk about something going in the wrong direction, one of the things that comes out is fear, right? And if
Mm,
you think
yeah,
about an emotion that is disabling,
yeah.
probably the most disabling emotion is fear and
Mm,
paralysis, and that's probably the last thing that you want when you're, in the operating room. And I think, the only way to counteract an emotion is really with a more powerful emotion, and a more powerful connection. And maybe you're right in a way. I feel like thinking about that connection with that patient,
mm,
and, with that child, actually allows that emotion to
mm,
dominate, so that, all other, uh, you know fears and other things really, they're there for their purpose. They let me know, hey, we've got a problem here that we need to solve, but it doesn't sort of, dominate it. It doesn't make it,
yeah.
take on a life of its own, like, oh, what's going to happen, what are they going to say, what no, it's because
Mhm,
it's you, the patient. You're there for a purpose, and
mhm.
that's gonna, you want that child to come through, and that's going to dominate everything. And I think
Mm.
maybe in a way it drowns out the negative emotions that can come out in that kind of situation.
Yeah, and kinda helps you know what to do next. That's really beautiful. I wanna talk a little bit about innovation because you're innovative in what you do. I mean, you're a creative problem solver. And how did that become a passion of yours? When did you kind of say, because, for those listening, like in congenital heart disease, there's some traditional, I'm using air quotes, like surgeries that are done in specific defects, right? But you've really kind of parlayed into sort of unknown territories and created things for patients that maybe wouldn't have options. And so how did you kind of get interested in that and then sort of take that leap towards those ideas?
Well, I'll my first all of my credits go to my mentors. So
Mm,
I'll preface it by saying that my first mentor is my father.
mm,
And I remember growing up, and when I'm tinkering with all these toys, rather than taking the approach of, throw that garbage out, kind of thing, he was very much, well, what are you going to do about this? And what are you going to do about that? And how are you going to, do this? And would actually, sort of nudge me along, even in my time machine making fantasies. And so, I think he really started the process of thinking innovatively, and saying, yeah, you can build that time machine. You just have to figure out how. Um,
mm,
and My most recent mentor, and the person who's really kind of shaped who I am and given me the space to innovate, has been my current mentor, Dr. Pedro Del Nido.
mm,
And Dr. Del Nido is an innovator, surgeon scientist in and of himself, and really taught me that you can do it even within a field that seems rigid and seems dogmatic. That
mm,
you can question the dogma, and in fact that's healthy to do, and showed me how to do that, and gave me the space to do that, encouraged me to do that. And that mentorship was really important. But probably the most important mentors of all are my families, my patients and
mm,
families. They're the ones who really tell me, yes, it's okay, yes, we want this, we want you to do this. And that's where I get my charge from.
mm,
I think, you know when anytime you're at sort of the cusp of innovation, there are always people within our field, giants within our field, who are going to criticize the controversial topics.
sure.
But the thing that keeps me going is the fact that families, who know about this, who understand what is what all of the treatments are, say, yeah, this is important and you should do this. And they're probably the
Mm,
biggest drivers of innovation for me. And
mm,
I get
mm,
a lot of energy, affirmation, and drive to keep moving forward.
mhm. I think a lot of times in the world of, you mentioned mentors, in the world of cardiology, but in all of medicine, it's like we kind of stand on the shoulders of the people before us and on the families, and then we keep going. So I was in Boston at the marathon actually last year with my son. My son Blake wants to be a scientist, so we went to the Boston Science Museum and literally spent like 4 hours there. But we walked into the math room, and this really struck me. I don't know if you've ever been in the math room there, but that back wall is full of people. I think it was like 1000 AD to like present day, and it's
Yeah.
these little signs, almost like bricks of people. And I still remember spending time reading about them, and like one of them's like he died trying, and then another person had this great thing that they became, but then the next person built upon it. And I've thought a lot about that, how like we want to do the thing in our life, but doing really important work means that more better things are coming along the way for others. And
Yeah.
so like making those choices to be innovative and to move things forward, like if we stay the same, nothing changes. But on that wall, all those people chose to do something different, to think of, and sometimes it didn't work
Yeah.
and sometimes it did. And I really, I think that's very important just in how we approach our world on a lot of places, but in medicine, it really matters. And so I just, I don't know, I thought about that and I thought, well, this is kind of how it's supposed to go. And, our story with our son, Ethan, and everything that he went through. And I feel like in some ways he contributed to that. And I really think that that's really important. I think it's bigger than just ourselves. And so I think it's very cool that families are part of that, right? Because we look and we see maybe the surgeon or the person doing, but you're so right. It's like the people that agree to this are part of that moving the field forward, if you will.
And I mean, in fact, I would say that the greatest motivation comes from that, because when you have a family that sacrifices so much, you can't help but feel humbled,
Mm,
motivated, and driven to do everything that you can. And I think
mm,
at that point, the naysayers, they just fall away. It just all falls
Yeah.
away. And at that point, it becomes about how do we make this happen? And these limits that people say, oh, you can't do this. There's no way you can do that. No, there's a way. Let's figure out how to make it happen. And
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like that charge. Um, when once I realized that it can happen, that you can break the sound barrier, uh, all it just really became an aha moment to me. And then now when I sit down with families and they say, hey, we really want to try to figure out how to do this, and I just bring out the entire everything that I can do, and share it with them, and sort of try to share my enthusiasm for something, or even a glimmer of a hope, and try to bring those through. Obviously, very much guided by what a family wants. I wouldn't want to do
Sure.
something innovative if it wasn't appropriate, but at least to be able to do that in a way that is open, transparent, to be able to provide everything that I can bring to the table, and show to families. And at that point, they tell me what to do. I
Okay.
just I have to tell the story of like I remember a couple of years ago, I started to think about ways to septate a single ventricle, just make a
Mm-hmm.
single ventricle to two with a
Mm-hmm.
artificial separation. And I had a family that was just did not want to have a single ventricle, and wanted to have something else done. And I was not going to offer this procedure because I'd never done it before. And um, you know, I was amazed at their persistence. They said, "No, that sounds like a great idea. We want this done because we want it we don't want that other path. We just know." And I was I
Mm.
was I was actually taken aback. I was like, "No, no, actually, you really don't. This is not the right
Yeah.
time." And I wouldn't go as far as to say they coerced me, but they were really persistent. And it turned out that worked out, and that child did well. And I just remember thinking that we think of a role as a physician as being the person who holds someone's hand through a difficult surgery, but in that situation they actually held my hand
Mm.
through it, and guided me through something that was different. And it felt really amazing that there's this give and take, and that I'm learning constantly from my families and my patients.
Yeah, that's so cool. So let's talk about that like sort of intersection of humanity and innovation because I think it's a really you kind of alluded to it a little bit before, but some people would say it's at odds. Some people would say that it's synchronous or synonymous. Like I I think it could be different at different times. Like it's a big topic which we could have like a whole podcast about, but what kind of guides you in that space and how do you think about that? Because when we're moving towards innovation, there's always that question of because we can, should we? Or, you know, when do we kind of say, well, I think it's time to stop, or no, I think this is something we should really try. And because the other side of this is not so great. So like how do you sort of, I guess, think about that? I know there's no perfect answer because every situation is so unique, but just I guess what are maybe like a guiding principle for you in that space?
Yeah, I think it is a topic for an entire podcast, but I feel that there has to be an intersection of various realms that are brought to bear when we're doing innovation. It's not just another discussion, another meeting with the family. It's not a simple well, this is what we're going to do, and
Mhm.
go from there. I see it going in steps. So I like to first think about it as, again, most important, get to know the patients and their
Mhm.
families. And I really want to know what their goals for care are. I want to know, but what are their aspirations, and what keeps them up at night, what fears do they have, and what knowledge do they have, because everybody comes to the table with a different set of preconceived notions
Mhm.
of what congenital heart disease looks like,
Mhm.
natural history and operated history. So I like to start with that, and then the next thing I do is bring the data to the table. I bring the options. I sort of say, okay, well, here are the options as I know it. Some that are standard, these will be the ones that 99% of people polled would offer. And
Mhm.
then I start to get into, well, here are the other options, and then I'm not afraid of talking about the entire spectrum, and trying as much as possible to bring everything that I know of,
Mhm.
onto the screen. So the options. And then I like to get to the next level of data, that is statistics. And,
Mhm.
everything's about probabilities. It's
Sure.
never 100% or 0%. And I know that that's really hard to comprehend. What does a 10%, risk mean? What does a,
Mhm.
90% success rate really mean? When it's your child. I mean,
Right.
those are numbers. What does that mean for me? But I still try to bring that, the numbers to the table. And then I just clear the table of all the data and all the data and options and statistics, and then I try to get a feel. I try to get what is our gut instinct telling us, because decision making
Mhm.
is really about, people who love a child, or their family member, really making a decision that they feel is right. And
Yeah,
there's
it's
there
true.
there's a power to that very kind of deep instinct, which I think, we don't acknowledge, or really talk much about in medicine, but is really at the core of decision making.
Yeah.
And it's about, um, being in a free space, in a safe space, where you can ask the questions, where you can really have the heart to heart discussions about,
Mhm.
what feels right. And I try to be as non-judgmental as possible. If somebody says I don't like your newfangled idea, I that's
Mhm.
that's 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 that's
Same.
perfectly good. This is not about me. It's not about my ideas. It's not about, you know me doing more of some, of what my ideas are. That's not what it's about. And I think that's very important for families, to understand, so that they're, we don't have any distractions from what the true purpose is.
Mhm.
And then knowing that, we're we maybe our decisions aren't going to turn out the right way, and to really come to grips and to terms with those decisions, and understand that we're doing the best that we can, and that's all that we can do at that
Right.
moment. um, and giving it the time, if we can, to say,
Mhm.
well, let's think more about it, let's have another meeting, and just to make it feel right. And so I
Mhm.
think, I like to go through that process, and I do think the data and the statistics are really important. But then I like that last decision point to be really a synthesis of everything, and have it be just a feeling that, this is a
Mhm.
good, this is an instinct of what feels right.
Mhm.
And I often find that we can get to that point where, everybody, I can almost feel that, settling. This
Mhm.
is what's right. And then we bring it around to hugs, and back to, and that's when I know that we've really merged innovation with humanity.
Humanity. That's beautiful. That's a gift to the families that you're working with to have that from you. I think that's pretty incredible. So I'm wondering if I was thinking about this, what is a burning question or like curiosity that you have about your work? Like if you could know I'm sure there's many things, but like one or two things in the world of, complex congenital heart disease today that you don't know, that we don't know in medicine. If there is something, like, what would be a couple keys that you feel like would like unlock possibility for your patients, like the patients that you're like, oh, if I just knew this, I could figure this out.
Yeah, I think to me, what is an ongoing, just amazing area of that's just unfolding now is understanding um, how development and how the heart develops.
Mm,
I still feel like, we, I marvel every time at, how the heart develops,
mhm,
for those on the podcast who don't know, the heart actually starts off as a straight tube, and then
mhm,
there's something that happens in the body where it just starts to fold and twist,
mhm,
and almost like um, almost like, sort of an artistic dance.
mhm,
Everything changes around, and then all of a sudden within 16 weeks you have this heart as we know it.
mhm,
And every step there are little genetic, gene signals that go into play to help, orchestrate this very complex dance. And we know some of what happens. We know some of the genes that direct it. We know some of the reasons why some congenital heart malformations form. But I feel like that is something that we're really, really in early infancy on. We
mhm,
don't really know how all of this works. And I think understanding that may allow us to, you know, better detect much earlier in pregnancy, when a congenital heart defect is about to occur, and perhaps then even think about ways of preventing that, from
mhm,
happening. Right now, we sort of wait until a child's born and then try to fix it. But boy, if you can prevent something from occurring, wouldn't that be really amazing?
yeah,
And the beginning of that is really understanding why, and why it
yeah.
happens and how it happens. But I've always found that human development of the development of the heart, embryologic development of the heart, to be really fascinating to me.
Hmm. Hmm. That's interesting. I agree with you. I sometimes think in the things that I see in the congenital heart community and even other communities that I've been part of, it's like if we could just interrupt the beginning of it, it would be so much better than trying to fix it on the back end. So I think that's a area of genetics and formation I think is so crucial really to a lot of pediatric illnesses, that diseases that we don't have answers to. So I hope whoever's listening will keep doing that, right? That's important. So, I'm wondering, I want to talk just a little bit more about you and, how you kind of do this important work that you do. Like, how do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of your mental health, your own physical heart, which is important for yourself, but for so many of these kids that you take care of? Like, do you have any practices that help you kind of just be able to continue doing what you're doing?
Well, it's thank you for that wonderful question, Jessica. And a well crept secret that I really don't share with very many people is that I have a routine in the morning.
Mm,
I I get up, try to get up sometime around 5:30 or so in the morning, and then I
mm,
spend an hour doing yoga
mm,
and meditation. So
mm,
and it's a critical part of my day. I will not miss it, and
mm,
even no matter, even if I've been up until 1 a.m., I will get up in the morning and I will
mm,
meditate and do yoga. And to me, it's a way of sort of centering, as you mentioned earlier.
mm,
It's a way to kind of build perspective and to
mhm,
understand, who I am, in this bigger
mhm,
cosmos, and to really just remember that we're we're not perfect. We're not, we can't do everything, but we do the best that we can.
Yeah.
And to be able to bring the best me to the to my patients, um,
Mhm.
is really important. A balanced me,
Mhm.
one who can, you know, think about the science, but also uh, hold a hand, or play with
Mhm.
play with the toy, and be able to just sort of run that spectrum. So that's really important. I after the day is done and I come home. My family is a very important part of my life, and we share a lot of our thoughts and perspectives, and that's very very important. And then I also I like, as I mentioned earlier, I like to run, I like to
Mhm.
hike, I like to play tennis and basketball, and I'm fortunate that I can still do many of these things, and you know, it allows me to really stop and smell the roses, and
Mhm.
appreciate the veins in the leaves, and the not this time of year, but
Yeah.
in Boston, but when
Yeah.
when I can, to just appreciate the you know everything around us, and how
Mhm.
fortunate we are to
Mhm.
to be able to
Mhm.
have each other, and have this world.
Mhm. It's almost like, the words that are coming to me, it's almost, and as I've kind of listened to you in this conversation, it's like you're almost connecting sort of like the physical to the spiritual in a sense of the way that you operate your practice of medicine. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think I am a very spiritual
Yeah.
person, Jessica, and I think that really, um, yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. And that's it's
Mhm.
hard. It's I remember when I was in medical school and learning about the human body and the way that it worked, and just feeling this rush of, oh my, how did this all come together? How did Mother
Yeah.
Nature create all this, or
Yeah.
what higher power, is
It's amazing.
at play? And I still have that wonderment every time, and
Mhm.
that you can't help but be elevated from our, you know, our sort of our petty concerns in life,
Yeah.
and to sort of thinking about how amazing this is. So
Yeah.
it is a very spiritual experience.
That so, after thinking through that, I wanted to ask you about kind of how you feel on a great day, like when things are you have a patient and things have gone amazing. I can imagine. I always think about, because I lived the last 13 months of my life in the hospital with my son. So I saw you all days, walking. But this is how I always have imagined, like, and been curious about surgeons or doctors. It's like that car ride home after a day. Like, what happens in that place? Because you're by yourself, you're away from that. If it's been a great day, like, what does that feel like? And then if it's been a really hard day, like, what does that feel like? And also, kind of to add on, just to bring in what we talked about before, like, and I'll say here, I kind of have the belief personally that, like, the people have their path, and we can intervene as much as we can, and we can try as much as we can. And I believe that about my own children. So I'll say that for myself as my own belief, and that we can give our best. But at the end of the day, like, it's beyond somewhat of my control. And so I'm wondering, like, how you feel on those days, and what that's like, and how you sort of make sense of those highs and lows in light of how you present yourself in the world.
Yeah, I think that's very important, and one of the things that I do without fail to this day, on my ride home, is I call mom.
Mm,
And if I've had a great day, I'm upbeat, and
yeah.
mom knows it. If I have a bad day, she knows how to kind of you know bring it all together, and
Yeah,
say
talk you through it. Yeah.
things are okay. And so, um, it kind of it's really about support. And I think,
Yeah.
as I said, my family, my wife, my kids, they all sort of understand kind of what I go through, and
Mhm.
the ups and downs. And they really they really are part of that
Mhm.
process and support team. But yeah, I definitely when things go well, you feel like, okay, this is working, and we can,
Mhm.
let's make sure that we spread this to other people, we share it to other people, thinking about, okay, let's share with our other colleagues and other people, and
Mhm.
when things don't go well, it's really, there's sleepless nights. There are nights
Sure.
where, like, what could I have done differently? And we have a process for debriefing,
Mhm.
for difficult cases. We have, every Saturday morning, all of the surgeons get together and we close the door, and we talk about, sort of
Mm.
our our best and worst cases, and kind of talk about things
Mhm.
that we can do differently. And so I think what we've realized, that it's inevitable. We're going to have successes, and we're going to have failures, but
Yeah.
we have to learn from them both, and turn every opportunity into a moment to make ourselves better.
Mm.
And if we can emerge from every experience, as a better person for that next child that comes through and walks through the door, then at least something good has come of it. And so,
Yeah.
I think that is very important, professionally, to do. And even if it means that we take, a weekend, a part of our weekend to do this, it's the only time when all of the surgeons can come together and can just kind of put their computers down, put their phones
Mm.
down, and just talk. And
Mhm.
that is, that's an important time for us.
Mhm. Yeah, I could imagine that. So this season on the podcast, I'm kind of focused on who we become and what we create from the heartaches that we witness in the world around us, but then the adversities also that we face. And so I'm wondering, like, your career pretty much stands face to face with adversity every day. What what did you really like about yourself because of what you do? Like, what that has grown out of the work that you've done? You're like, I'm really happy with that. I've become this about myself because of what I do.
Well, it's certainly true that you are, you're a construct of everything that you do, and vice versa. You bring your mentality into, everything that you do.
Mhm.
And I like the fact that I have become someone who understands that purpose of what we're here for. I feel like
Mm.
I understand who I am because of, um, my mentors, my patients, and families. They've given me purpose, in life, and I know that, if I can be there to alleviate suffering, to help a family through a difficult process, you know that gives me, immense purpose. And so
Mhm.
I feel that, all the other things that may happen, in life, all the things, car breaks down, this is broken, that's happening, you may even have difficulties within, your own family, that that there's a greater purpose, and
Yeah.
that these things, we can handle them, we take care of them, but because we can then come back and do something, greater.
Mhm.
And I'm very appreciative of that. I think it's something that my patients, my family, my career has given me, and
Mhm.
allowed me, to change. And it really all, it comes together, when, when you're, like you said, you're facing, a major, life changing, event, or you're doing something extremely overwhelming. It just allows you to put everything into perspective.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Ram, thank you so much for this time today. I will say that you are for sure living out your purpose, and it's really awesome to be able to witness. And I know that I can say on behalf of so many families that love you, thank you for all that you do and for being who you are. It's
Well,
been
Jessica,
great to
this
talk
was
to
an
you.
amazing conversation. A lot of things that I've never really talked about
Yeah.
before, and thank you for sharing this perspective with others.
Thank you for joining me here on the Heartstrong podcast. Please rate and review this podcast and share an episode that you love with a friend, because when you do, you help us grow our mission of encouraging people to grow through the challenges of their lives and to live their full potential. We'll see you next time.